There's some things you can only learn like in the storm, in your life experience. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of The Way. I'm one of your hosts, Dayla.
And I'm the other host, Shantae.
And today we're going to talk about being in the storm. Yep. So, what it's like whenever you're in the storm and you feel like maybe God isn't with you, or the attacks are just so great, it's hard to see Him working. And we'll just really dive into things that help us in the storm and things that we've learned in our own storms. And I will say, just an update, had my surgery. Thank God it was not cancer. It's just really bad endometriosis. So they got the whole cyst out. And I am on my way to recovery, about 2 weeks post-op.
Yep. And it may look like I'm crying, but it's a lot of congestion, sinus congestion going on right now. And they was like, we can do it tomorrow. I was like, no, this is not stopping us. No, I'm joking. But no, but Dayla had her surgery. That was definitely a season of just trusting God during that. And then I also quit my job. So that has been another step of faith that I've done. So if you know me, I've always kept a job, and I've quit 2 jobs just this year, stepping out on faith. So yeah, this is definitely where we're stepping out on water and trusting everything that God is telling us to.
Yeah.
So
do you want to start? Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with your job and what that's been like?
It was definitely warfare that I never experienced ever. A lot of evil in there. I never experienced, and I told you this earlier, like I've never experienced someone attacking me intentionally just because. Like I didn't even, like I knew it existed, but I've never been on the other side of it. And I think the biggest part for me is knowing that I was seeking God through it too. Like, okay, God, you have me here. You have me sitting here intentionally. Because I remember telling you one day, like, it was almost like deja vu, right? Like when my supervisor was in my office and she came in there, and I had previously listened to a message from Stephanie, and she said, you know, when you have deja vu, it's God telling you you're in the exact place where He has you. And my supervisor came in, she was talking to me, and I felt like I had been there before. And that happened as soon as I listened to listened to that message. So I immediately hit you up. I was like, whoa, this happened. And I even wrote it down on a sticky note on my desk, and I was like, timestamp this happened, boom. So I knew I was supposed to be there, right? And of course, like on the backside, I was questioning. I rushed into this job. I rushed into trying to get my own house, right? But at the same time, I was forgetting all the confirmations that God had told me. You even told me that too, right? Because you were like, you know, what about your house? Like you asked for confirmation on the house and you got confirmation. But when I was going through those attacks, it didn't feel like I was supposed to be there. Because it's like someone intentionally attacking your character, someone intentionally attacking just you as a person. And I have never been through that before. It had me questioning my self-confidence. It had me questioning a lot of things about myself, like am I even good enough, you know? And all of that was a lie, right? Because there's nothing more. I heard Pastor Philip Anthony Mitchell say yesterday when I was listening to the Acts 2:42 conference, the devil don't have to attack what he already owns,
right?
And so that's why those attacks kept on coming to me. And at some point I was like, okay, God, like I'm trying to stick through it. I feel like you want me to get through this. But then it just came to a point to where I felt like I got a message from God, like, hey, you need to walk away from this. you need to step away. So my old pastor from Word of Life, he prophesied a message way back at the beginning of the year, but I just happened to be listening to it a few weeks ago in my office, and it was basically like he said, I see a young woman, um, and you have all of these people trying to pull on your arms and make you into something that you're not. And he took a long pause. He was like, I just hear the Lord saying, step away from that. Now, I wept in my office when I heard that because I knew it was for me, right? But then fear came. How am I going to pay for my house? How am I going to pay bills? Like, how am I going to do all of this? And so I stayed. Like, I kept trying to endure it. But then it came to a point to where I was like, if he told me to leave, then I know he's going to take care of me.
Right.
And then it's like the attacks kept coming, and then I just sat in and I was like, you know what? This is not worth it. I just have to just step away. But like, it's different when you're sitting in it and people are attacking you. Like, situations have attacked me before, but not people.
Right.
If that makes sense. And so it was hard to see the person. I mean, because I remember you told me before, you was like, we battle not against flesh and blood, right? It was so hard to see the spirit in the person, or just like God in that person, because it was like, they're literally, like, they hate me, it felt like. And then, so I kept on having to remind myself, like, we're not worried about her. We're not worried about the flesh. Like, these are spirits that are controlling her to do this to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I continued. I started having to pray, and then the other day, it brought me to Luke 6, verse 27, where it says, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you." And so I continued to pray for her. Like, there's nothing more that I want than for someone to get into their salvation and realize that the way that they're living is not the true way that Jesus has called us to live. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's my main mission. It was not to attack her back, because that would just make me just like her. Right. Like, so for me, I had to pray for her until my heart matched what I was praying for.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot. Like, there was a lot of things in that job that I learned about other people, about what they needed intercession for. And so, yes, I have their names all over my prayer board, right? Like, so I'm continuing to pray for them, even though I was mistreated, even though I was intentionally attacked. I just had to step away from it first and foremost, because there's nothing that I could have done that was going to change that situation. There's nothing that I would have ever been good enough for them, because they were already on the verge of, hey, she's got to go, right? Yeah. And so for me, I had to step away and then intercede, because power and prayer, right? Like, I have to pray for them and pray that. And people were like, you need to write letters. And I'm like, I don't have to do any of that, because I know that God is going to take care of it on the back end. And then that he's also going to take care of me as well. And so now it's just understanding that it's not about me. It's about what he had to take me through to understand, one, what I was looking in that situation of like, what are you trying to teach me? Mm-hmm. Right? Because on this journey that we're on now, I can guarantee you people are going to try to attack us even more. Yeah. Right? And I had to endure that, perfect that in a way that, one, my heart doesn't feel hate at all for that situation. Like, I was definitely getting fearful, but there was never any hate. And poor Dayla, she in the hospital bed. She's here trying to heal, and then I would just come to her every day. Oh, they're here. This is what's happening now. Like, and I was like, we're just gonna have to pray. And I'm thinking to myself, we need to go ride. No, I wasn't. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult when there's a person that you have to work side by side with, or just do life side by side with, because like you said, we're at work the majority of the time,
Right.
then we're at home. It's very difficult to see past their evil actions towards you, uh, and just sit there and take it. um, and so I know I said a lot, but what was your take on it, like whenever I was going through it?
I was just thinking as well, like how the enemy will use a job to attack somebody, because like you were saying, we're there, at least most of us, 5 days a week, and if not 4 days a week, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. So we spend a lot of time at work, and like we need finances to, we need resources to make it. So using something like that can really mess with your mental whenever it's a toxic environment.
Yeah.
So like while you were going through it, I definitely didn't like to see you go through it, but at the same time I understand, because it's like, you have to provide. So that's how he can use situations like that. And I think it's so good that like you can step out on faith and trust God to walk away from something that is not fruitful for you.
Yeah.
I definitely think that's something people have to pray about. Like you're going through that with the job, you don't want to just up and quit. Like you definitely want to ask God, seek Him for guidance on it.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be in any situation that is toxic, where people are trying to bring like the bad side out of you, or like your characteristics before you really came to know Christ. So I think definitely, though, like you said, praying and interceding for people that act like they don't like us, or that they're not being, I don't know what the word, nice to us.
For sure.
Like it's hard. That's hard to do. So I think that's definitely a growth in your character from that situation.
Thank you. And and it almost, I think one of the biggest reasons why I didn't leave sooner was because it almost made me feel weak. Like it was attacking my strength as a woman of God. Like you can't defeat me, the woman of God that God has called me to be. Called me to be here. But God also didn't call me to sit there and suffer. He also didn't call me to sit there and fight the battles that I know I couldn't win.
Right.
So he's fighting them for me even now. He's fighting them for me now. And it wasn't my fight, but I was sent there to learn something. I was sent there to learn their specific situations, to pray for them, to intercede for them. Like I was sent there to learn. And I think a lot of people in your storm, whatever you're going through, right? Like you're so quick to just move. Like I need to get out of this without learning anything, right? And that just defeats the whole lesson, because then you're going to get put back in that same situation. And that pattern of your behavior, like for me, if I hadn't learned what I learned now, like going into the next job or whatever I go into next, I don't know, but God has prepared me that people are evil, and this is how you have to deal with it.
Our spirits behind people.
Spirits behind people are evil, and this is how you have to deal with it. And so, like my encouragement to you all is learn something in your storm. Seek God in the storm. What is He trying to teach you? Go to the book of Proverbs. Like Dayla and I were at a coffee shop earlier, and this Proverbs I brought up, and it says Proverbs 12 verse 16. Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. So anytime that I'm insulted, anytime that you're insulted, if we show our annoyance and we pop an attitude right back, like that's a fool's way, right? But if you're able to overlook something that someone is intentionally doing to you, then that is wisdom. That is, hey, you can't touch me because that doesn't resonate with me, right? And so just seek God through your storm. And the book of Proverbs is full of wisdom. And yeah, so that's where I'm at. I am currently first week without the job, trusting that God is going to open doors for me for sure. But yeah, and then like on top of that, you went through your thing.
Yeah.
In the middle of, and I think I don't want to miss this. Like, the enemy will use anything to distract us, right? And I think I told you in the beginning, like, I feel like I'm being attacked really hard right now to distract me from praying for you, right? I never stopped praying for you, but it's just like I found myself praying more about my situation because it was just consuming me. And I'm like, well, Dayla is going through a lot right now too. And it's just like I was getting pulled, and it was definitely a battle in my head. And I remember coming to you and like, I'm really struggling. I am really struggling. And it was definitely hard, but hindsight, right? I've learned a lot. I'm still praying for them, and I'm not allowing that situation to devalue me, to attack my character. Like, I'm still remaining in God, and I am who He has called me to be, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. I guess I'll talk some about my situation. I don't even really know where to start.
Child, from the beginning. Let's start when I first moved here.
Well, I was, because
it wasn't there.
Well, I've been dealing with the cyst for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like 12 centimeters, but it was like small. Like I could see it in my lower abdomen, but it wasn't really something that I was just focusing on. I actually had went PRN at my job, didn't have insurance at the time, was not even intending on like going to the doctor. And then it's like all of a sudden it's 18 centimeters covering my whole stomach. Like literally it looked like I was pregnant. People were asking me if I was pregnant. Like it wasn't just a little thing. It was like a full-blown cyst, full with fluid, covering my whole stomach. So at that point it's like, okay, I got to get insurance. I got to go to the doctor. And while I was going through it, like we prayed so hard for miraculous healing.
Yeah.
Like for healing without surgery or anything. So whenever I went through surgery, like even up until the point that I went to sleep, I was like confident I was going to wake up and they were going to say like, your cyst is gone. It's been healed without surgery. Like we didn't even have to cut you. So whenever I woke up and had this incision and I've gone through this surgery, I'll be honest, I was mad at God. And that was like my first lesson I had to learn, because the surgery had the best outcome it could possibly have. Like it could have been cancer. It could have been, they had to do a full hysterectomy. Like they just took one of my ovaries and the cyst. So I was so mad at God, even though like I had been healed in the best way possible. So the first lesson I learned was like, you can't expect God to answer your prayers just the way that you are expecting him to answer them, or the way you want him to answer them. Like we have to see that he's working, even if it doesn't look the way that we think that it's supposed to look. So I went through the surgery and I initially was mad at God, but it's like while I was in the hospital, the attacks kept coming. So first, like my hemoglobin dropped. So that's like where you're anemic and you need a blood transfusion. So hemoglobin dropped, needed a blood transfusion, got the blood transfusion. Hemoglobin was still low. So I had to get 2 more units of blood. So now I'm like, oh, am I bleeding on the inside? I wasn't, thank God. So that happened. And then it was like, it took a long time for my bowels to wake up. So I ended up with something called ileus. And that's where your bowels aren't working. And I had been eating, so there was food just sitting on my stomach. And that can make you sick. That can make you have sepsis. So I had to have an NG tube put down my nose. I actually threw up before that happened, thankfully, because I don't know if anybody is watching has had an NG tube. That was the most traumatizing experience of my life.
Yeah.
Well, not the most traumatizing. That was really traumatizing. So got the NG tube. That went over, and it was just like at that point I went from being mad at God to just praying like, God, let me out, get me out of this, because I didn't know when I was going to get out of the hospital, when I was going to go home. a 3 to 5 day stay ended up being a whole week, which that doesn't sound like a long time, but when you're in the hospital, that's a long time.
Yeah.
So, and then like the time I had the surgery scheduled, we were actually supposed to go to the Acts 242 conference.
Yeah.
And it was really disappointing not to be able to go to that. So, I'm talking to God about it, and I feel the Holy Spirit say, there are things you could definitely would have learned at that conference, but there's some things you can only learn like in the storm, in your life experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you were saying, like being able to pick out, God, what are you teaching me from this storm? And now looking back, like whenever I was going through all that in the hospital, I want to say, it's important to have a village.
Yeah.
It's important to have people who are going to pray for you whenever you don't even have the faith at the time or the strength to pray for yourself. So I'm thankful for you, like our family members that were calling me, praying for me, because that definitely got me through. But also, just being able to look back at it now, I couldn't see God in it at all whenever I was going through it. Like I was like, God, where are you? But now looking back, like he was there the whole way. Like even the fact that like I went full time at my job and my insurance wasn't supposed to start until November 1st, but they ended up letting me go ahead and start it October 1st. So that way I could get in the doctor, I could get surgery. Or right now I would just be at the beginning of the whole process.
Yes.
And then, like I said, like the surgery went the best way that it could possibly go. And it turns out like my doctors are actually oncologists. So they only see patients that have cancer or possibly have cancer. So the only way I could get into them was to have an abnormal lab value that they check. It's called CA-125 to see your risk of having ovarian cancer. Normal lab value is 35. Mine was 214.
Yeah.
So that is the only way I could get into that doctor. And at the moment, whenever the first doctor I went to told me that, like, that seems like that's an attack.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like this is very likely to be a slow growing cancer. That's what she told me.
Yeah.
So with that, God got me to the right doctors to do my surgery to have the best possible outcomes. So I can see him in that. And then it's just so much. I don't even remember what else I was about to say, but it was like now looking back, I can just see him in all the little details. Whereas whenever I'm going through it, I'm like, God, you're not protecting me. God, because I was even like, how did the devil get to me like this to where it grew so big? But God knowing us, like he knew I was not going to go to the doctor about that. Like I was just gonna let it keep going. Like I'm okay. I can still work out. I can still work. It's not that big. And it becoming that big made it something that I can't ignore.
Yeah.
So whenever God restores us, like he wants to restore us in all areas of our life. And it starts first with him restoring us to himself. So once we get to know him, then he comes in, he restores our mind, he restores our body. So that was, I feel like, a part of restoring my health because I needed that cyst out and I was going to keep ignoring it unless it got to the point that I couldn't, which is exactly where it got to. So I think that I say all that to say, like, you might not be able to see God while you are in the storm, but once you get through it, or maybe while you're in it, like if you really look, you'll see like he is in all of the details. And even when it feels like he's not working and he's not fighting for you, like he definitely is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just from watching it, I didn't think that you were going to have surgery either. I strongly felt that God was going to heal you.
Yeah.
I remember coming up there ready to put some prayer oil on you, and you were like, don't put that on me because they're about to. I was just, okay. And so, like, for me, I was questioning too, like, God, like, why didn't you heal her?
Yeah.
And it's like, God was saying, someone else is going to go through this same situation, and they're going to need her testimony during the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're going to need to know how she went through it so that they can get through it as well. Because after you came out of surgery and all of those things started going wrong, like, I was like, oh my goodness, what is happening here?
Yes.
And then, like, I could tell that you were down, like you weren't feeling your best. You definitely were like, where is God? And so I started praying even harder. I was like, God, like, I need you to send her a word. I need some encouragement sent her way. I need something to spark her faith. Like, I was ready to try anything, and you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I was ready to try anything, but God was like, your prayer is enough. Your prayer is enough. And I think for those of you who feel like miraculous things can't happen, they absolutely can, but it's God's plan that is going to prevail, right? And we have to trust him unconditionally. I think that's where a lot of people get their love, is like, hey, I love you, I'll love you if this, I'll love you if this, but I'll love you even though you don't do this for me, right? That's unconditional love. And we have to trust him through the process no matter what, because Jeremiah 29:11, I have came to prosper you, not harm you, right? Give you plans and hopes of a future filled with good things. And so if we hold on to that and we hold on to God's promises for us, we know that he's teaching us this for a reason. Now, it does not feel like that in the middle of it. Like, me and my job, Dayla in the hospital, it does not feel like that. But whenever you do have community, like Dayla said, right? Like, when you have people praying for you, that means you have to get vulnerable and talk about how it's making you feel. Talk about where you think God is working on you at, right? Where you think you're missing God at. And then intercession, the power of prayer. Like, people praying for you is going to help God speak to you even more, right? And, like, community is so great in times of your storm, right? And it helps to know that you're not alone in it. So I think that's so good. And you want to tell them about the man coming up there?
Oh yeah, like after you prayed, I had like the pastor in the hospital come in. And it was like the first time, because I've been in the hospital for this before. I've had surgery for this before, but I've never had like the pastor at the hospital come in, and he was just talking about like how God like uses these things as part of our testimony, and how like Paul wrote the book of Philippians while he was in prison, like how good things can come from situations that don't seem good. And that's definitely a word. Like, God uses those scenarios to refine us. One of the scriptures I wrote down is Proverbs 17:3. Just turn to it, because it's like nothing that God does or nothing that happens, like, it's everything that happens can be used by God.
Yeah.
So good or bad, he can use it for good. Like Romans 8:28 says, he causes all things to work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So knowing that everything is not always going to be good, but he can use it for good. And it says Proverbs 17:3, the crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. So what that's saying is, like, you use a crucible to melt down silver, a furnace to melt down gold. And when those metals are melted down, all of the impurities are separated from the pure gold to make it pure. So, and then it says, but the Lord tests the heart. So the Lord sifts through our heart, and he can use storms and tests and trials to sift out the impurities and the things that aren't like him. So it's actually a blessing to go through the fire. And I wrote down Daniel 3:25-27, like for anybody who feels like they're in a storm in the fire right now. Like that's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. The king threw them in the fire because they wouldn't worship this idol he created. And while they're in the fire, there's three of them, but they say, the fourth man shows up in the fire and they come out and their clothes aren't burned. And it's like, you will come out of this when you're following God, not looking like what you've been through. And I honestly feel like with my situation, like it's such a blessing. I'm 2 weeks post-op, but it's like it feels like what people pray for when they're like, I'm praying for you a speedy recovery because I'm getting around good. Like I am limiting what I do, obviously not lifting and stuff, but I don't feel like I just had a whole surgery. Like I have to remind myself I can't do certain things. So it's like when you come out of the fire, you won't be burned.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's so good that you say that because a lot of people will question, well, why is God allowing this to happen to me anyways?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is he allowing these things to happen to me? Like, why do I even have to go through there?
Yeah.
And he allows trials, like you said, he allows things to happen so you can get purified because you have to be able to handle those hardships, handle those situations the way that Jesus handled them, right? And like she said, you have to get purified in that way. And if you don't get purified the way that he wants you to, it's going to continue to happen. Like those cycles are going to continue to happen until you are perfect in that place. Now, we're not perfect. None of us are going to be perfect, right? But it is progression, right? We get better each time. And I think that just for those who think that nothing bad should happen to us, like just seek God in whatever you're going through, and you will see why you're going through it. Now, you may not see it till you come out of it.
And sometimes you actually might not see why, but God knows.
You just have to trust it at that point. Trust it and then really do some self-seeking on like, hey, like why did I react that way? What is triggering me? What is something that I need to work on? Things like that. Because pride can get in the way of a lot of things to heal you, because you may think that your way is better, and at the end of the day it's surrender. They surrender all of your ways so that he can make you perfect and complete.
And then it's like you also have to take toll of where is this storm coming from, because if you are living outside of God's will, then he will definitely use a storm to bring you to himself. So you have to take inventory of like, am I following God or am I following my own way? And then this way is leading me to this storm. So, and then you also have to take inventory of the way people around you, because God will send storms into other people's lives. And it's like, if you are trying to rescue someone out of a storm that God sent, then you're going to get rained on too. So it's like, you have to realize, is this because I'm not following God? Is this, spiritual warfare? Or like, what am I supposed to learn in this? Like we've been talking about, but also take inventory, like, why, if this is this something I'm doing on my part that I need to change.
Yeah. And let's not forget that, like, the scripture Matthew 5:45 came to me, and it says that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Mm-hmm. So doesn't matter who you are, a storm is going to come, right? It's going to come because God wants his children to come to him. He wants the righteous to be perfected in their faith. He wants the unrighteous to come to him no matter saved, what and be saved, right? So like, don't think just because you can you're not getting touched that it's not going to come, right? But he sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous, so everybody's gonna get hit.
Yeah. I think to talk about some things that like helped me while I was going through it, one thing was just counting my blessings. So like even though all of these bad things are happening, like God is still keeping me. Like in the surgery went well, that it wasn't cancer. Like I had to keep reminding myself of those things while I was going through the storm, to know like he is faithful and he is showing up for me. Like I said, even if it's not the way I expected him to show up for me, that doesn't make him any less. Like he is still God. He is still in control. He is still all powerful, even if he didn't show up the way I wanted him to.
Yeah.
He showed up in the way that he was meant to, and the way that he knew was best, because his ways are not our ways. Like his thoughts are not our thoughts. They're higher than our thoughts. So I think just remembering to what you are thankful for and how he has showed up for you.
I think that's so good, and it reminds me of Luke. Let me find it really quick. I was just on it. Luke chapter 6. Am I passing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, it's after that.
There it is. So when you talk about like when the storms come, and like, so for, I was thinking about, like, while you were talking, I was like, man, like, cause I was scared that your faith was getting your faith was getting rocky in there, and so I was like, yeah, like I was afraid of that. So I'm like, God, like she needs something. I don't care what it is. She needs something. But like hearing you speak now, it's like you were never moved. You were never moved, because when it says in Luke 6, Luke 6, verse 48. No, verse 47. Luke 6, verse 47. As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on the rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck, and that struck that house, but it could not shake it because it was well built.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It could have it probably did some outside damage a little bit, but you remained, right? You remained because your foundations are in God and not the world,
right?
Your foundations, your beliefs are in God and not what the doctors say, or whatever the case may be. And that's just so encouraging to me. It's because, like, I've seen you put in the work. I've seen you help me through things. I've seen you speak life into your brother, speak life into Jay, speak life into other people. And so he has not forgotten that, right? And it's just so encouraging just to hear how strong you're speaking and everything. And it's here. This is proof of why you were not moved. It's because you were built on a firm foundation. But listen to what it says next. It says, but the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete. Like, if we were not embedded into the word and have a relationship with God, when storms come, it could just rock us.
Yeah.
It could just tear us apart. And because we have faith, because we know that God loves us and he is here to not harm us but to prosper us, we can stand firm on he's protecting me.
Right.
And we cannot be destroyed because of a storm that is coming our way. So, man, that was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
I think also what keeps coming to my mind is like whenever Jesus calls Peter out to walk on water, and he steps out of the boat, and at first he's walking on the water, and because he's looking at Jesus, but then when he starts to look at the wind and the waves, he takes his eyes off of Jesus, and that's when he starts to sink. So I think that's probably the most important thing when you're in a storm, is keep your eyes on Jesus. And it's so hard, because I know whenever I was going through it, it was so hard, like I was saying, to see him in that. But he doesn't lose sight of us, thankfully. Like, he is so good to us and so faithful. So even whenever Peter started to sink, Like Jesus grabbed him, pulled him out. And it's like just keeping your eyes on him, keeping your faith on him, even whenever it feels shaky. Like you said, when you have that foundation, he'll come and rescue you every time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so good to ask for help whenever you need it. Ask for help. Don't keep it to yourself. Um, in Proverbs it says, you get around fools, you'll become one. But make sure you're around people that are full of wisdom of the Word of God. Um, like you need someone that is going to uplift you. You need someone that is going to encourage you. Get around people that are going to do that for you. So whenever you ask for help, they go to the Father.
Yes.
And then the Father will tell them what to do for you. And that is the perfect way, because culture's way isn't gonna do anything, but the Father's way, He wants best for us. And so that's my encouragement for you all, is to get around people that are going to uplift you, encourage you, and pray for you.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to have a circle full of people and none of them can pray for you.
Yeah.
None of them can intercede on your behalf. None of them are following Christ. Like if you want to follow Christ and you're around people who are following the world, then it's going to be really hard whenever they bring those temptations of the world to you. Like
Yeah.
if you don't have anybody around you that can pray for you, that's a scary place to be.
It is scary, and you may not think it's scary right now because you're probably with them, but at the end of the day, don't be afraid to step away in solitude for a while and allow God to do a work in you so that you can go back and pray for them, right? Just because you're stepping away for a while doesn't mean you leave forever. Like God could be calling you right now to step out, step in solitude, get to know Him, build that foundation with Him so that you're not moved. And then you go and help those that you left. Because I'll tell you what, He'll leave the 99 to get to the one.
Yeah.
He will.
Jerry Flower says before He elevates you, He separates you.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to be separated.
Right. That's a good way. Yeah, that's good. That's good. You got anything else?
No, I think that's all I got.
All right. Well, family, we are done for today. If you enjoyed this message, if you enjoyed any other message, make sure you click that like and subscribe button on our YouTube channel. We are also in the works of getting it on the podcast platform, and then soon enough, it will be available on all platforms,
Hopefully,
right?
Yeah.
Hopefully. We just have to figure it out. But as always, family, hope that you're living the way. We love you. Have a blessed week.
Have a blessed week, everyone.